G'day, guys. Thank you for being here. Lovely crowd. I started off with this title that Scotty put up, but it was a bit of a mouthful, and I've got a short attention span in the last couple of days that I wrote the talk. I went off topic a little bit, but hopefully we'll bring it down to the message that I'm trying to distill. So I guess we'll start with what does farming mean to me? To me, farming's one of the most important things that we can talk about. I mean, it's obviously nourishment and sustenance for our communities, but it also involves a lot of harmony or alignment with nature. To farm, you really need that information, as I think as Max put it yesterday, information from the sun, the solar myth, to come down, interact with our earth, our soil. We need water systems, and we need this complete harmony and alignment with nature to produce food that then nourishes our body. So it's almost like our physical shell, right? Our physical body requires alignment with nature. And farming's the backbone upon which civilization's built. And if you understand the agrarian revolution, which occurred roughly 10 to 12,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent in Iran, rapidly spread too, almost as though there was a higher intelligence that was guiding humanity, and teaching humanity. You can say farming spread because it was so advantageous, but it doesn't quite make sense when you look at how quickly and how rapidly it spread through the world. And ancient myth tells of more enlightened beings that would teach them this art of agriculture. And it's almost as though it allowed for an upgrade in our consciousness. Consciousness is what evolves, right? It's not necessarily our physical shell. It is mainly consciousness that upgrades. So farming gave rise to math, legal code, poetry, art, all of that. Civilization is built on it. And really, when you think about that, farming basically is the story of love. That's my young fella Leon there, and that's a few of the farmers that work on my farm and have certainly mentored me. Because farming for me it's not a natural thing. I'm medically trained, and it's not something that runs in my blood. Certainly, Leo's mother's family is certainly they're cattle farmers from generations ago, and it's in his blood. And when he talks about the lack of interest that he's got in school, and but then you see him on the farm, and you just realise you can't force a soul to do something it doesn't want to do. And so when Max and Simon invited me to Jake's farm to speak, I agreed. I've been here 2 years ago. I always agree because I like the way farmers like Jake are trying to change the way things are done. I love his eloquence. I love his strength, and I love his food. And I'm pleased to say that he's someone who supplies our family with food. And hopefully I'm raising a man that can take on the challenge that farming has in front of it. It's certainly a huge challenge. With regards to my talk, I'm often told that I should speak less on some of these less tangible aspects that I tend to wander, or my mind tends to wander into, and focus more on nutrition and gut health. They say these metaphysical realms that I stumble into, it's almost a spiritual realm, and why would I go there? But when you think about it, a war on the oldest food that we as human beings have consumed, for 4 to 6 million years, it is really an act of spiritual war against the species. Promoting heavily ultra-processed foods which degrade our earth and our soil through monocrop systems is an act of spiritual war against the species. Turning our farms into barren wastelands for renewable energy, in inverted commas, is spiritual warfare. So the solution is you've got to lift your awareness. You've got to lift your mind, right? But our mind comes from a realm that is outside the tangible realm. You know, I said for physical health, you need nature, but for a mind that's healthy, you need something that's outside the physical realm. We need to embrace the intangible aspect, which is metaphysics, which is what a lot of my talk will focus on. Up there is one of my best mates, Eamon Waddington. He's a local boy, he's an Albury boy, and you know, he's someone that's very special to me because he's just helped reconnect a man who's medically trained back onto the land, and he's taught me this love for hunting. And it's certainly, I mean, my son idolises Eamon. They're great mates. I graduated age 21 as a doctor. I was just a kid, you know, when I finished. I've been a doctor for almost 2 decades, a physician, you know, and I wore that title super proudly. I displayed it, that accolade, on the wall behind me as I sat there consulting, and now look back with a lot of, you know, with a lot of regret, because I suppose there was a lot of arrogance shown. But I've spent the last decade with hunters and farmers and people who source their food with a very short supply chain, and it's allowed me to kind of descend into depth. It's given my character depth, and I've come to understand disease from a different level. I've come to understand the importance that food systems have on our gut health, or health in general. And when you descend into depth to give your own character depth, you lose yourself in those depths, and it's a deep tunnel. And to be honest, I'm still lost within it. But really, I think about it, and you realise that it's only the people that are hopelessly lost that can ever draw a map for others to then navigate themselves out of it. You know, and so I embrace being lost. You know, when people call me a lost soul, I love it. Metaphysics, well, what is that? Metaphysics means beyond, outside the universe. You know, as I mentioned earlier, it's the study of origins. You know, the slit lamp experiment shows that until you observe a waveform, it does not become a particle, right? And if you think of the entirety of this cosmos, right, as a giant particle, who was the observer? Something needed to observe it for it to collapse the infinite wave, right? To not comprehend that means that your basic grasp on science is poor. This is where the metaphysical and the physical collide, the spiritual world and the scientific world collide. It's an intersection, and we have to pay attention to that. And metaphysics is the foundation of philosophy. It's without it, can't deal with reality, right? And so you best embrace it. You might think I'm weird, but best embrace it. So really, my journey has been that of a physician, right, to a metaphysician. It's a metamorphosis, a really painful one. And I often wonder if a monarch butterfly feels pain as it struggles out of a chrysalis. I use the word butterfly because, not because I'm beautiful, but to me it's symbolism, right, for art or artistry. You know, some people use paint, other people use musical instruments. I use words. You know, I used to dissect cadavers as a medical student, you know, dead bodies as a medical student, to understand what the body, how it worked. But now I spend my time dissecting information, paragraphs, words, and I do that to become a wordsmith, because language is everything. That is how you communicate the mind, and the mind is beyond the body. We have to understand there's a separation there. The body is what is used to express the mind, to express consciousness. So, you know, and I wrote this a little while ago, and think of it symbolically and metaphorically. Please don't interpret it literally. And so much of our theology that was ever written, whether it's the Bhagavad Gita or Christianity, Islam, it was written by people that had far more intelligence than us, that could understand language symbolically rather than literally. We interpret things so literally. We're bystanders in a battle, an ancient war that is as old as the cosmos itself. That is no aurora borealis. Those are archangels and archons clashing in the heavens above. Sparks from their blades, a deluge upon Babylon, a rain of fire. Mankind is immersed in his own battle within these walls of the city, an unseen force that yearns power. It's the blade of disinformation that's held up against the pulsing artery in his neck. If disinformation and misinformation is the enemy's weapon, then we can only counter it with information, a battle with ink. It's a war of syntax, war of words, and the deepest gash is inflicted with it. The enemy, our enemy, is eloquent, blessed with a silver tongue. The war demands our equivalence. We've got to step up, a firm grasp on language, a death-like grip upon the hilt of the pen. And this is why I write and talk. It's to try and elevate awareness. If I can incentivize some level of thought, I don't need applause. I just want to be able to incentivize thought. I want you guys to be able to think. And we need men and women well equipped with information and eloquence to counter the thrust of disinformation. I love this quote from James Baldwin. It might not project well there, but he says, the role of an artist is exactly the same as the role of a lover. If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things that you don't see. So if I love you, I have to add to awareness. And you might expect me to use science to counter this, but Carl Jung wrote in his seminal work, The Red Book, and he wrote that book during a battle, or one would say a blessing almost, of psychosis. He descended into madness, and in that madness, the veil of the filter that is our brain lifted, and what he saw was documented in this book, and it's a brilliant book. And in that he states science is too superficial. It's too superficial for us human beings. Our minds are more than that. And you might expect me to present information here, analysing papers and evidence-based medicine. And I tried that. I tried that very early on in the journey, and I failed at it. And I just pull this from my some of the things I've written. But as a man of science, I had to succumb to the fact that there was something unfathomable, something enigmatic, and compellingly mercurial at work here. I tried to explain it using science. How laughably I failed. In exasperation, I flung away my books and collapsed onto my knees. In sheer mental exhaustion, I was exhausted. I needed to understand it. Serendipitously, from that position, from that vantage on my knees, was now how I could view the unfathomable, this concept of awareness and consciousness. So please don't expect like a rational talk, full of tables and data and so forth. I can't speak that language anymore, and I think we as human beings deserve something better than science. You have to look around, and science has given us a lot, but science is also the weapon that is turned against you in what is known as the final stage of tyranny. It's something called technocratic governance, and it's okay. I mean, we're being plunged into difficulty, but our species is in a process of evolution, and evolution's glorious, and I can see the duet that runs it. You need a maelstrom of difficulty. You need difficulty for evolution to occur. Without it, there is no growth. So we need difficulty in the quantum field. Combine it with mutations in genetic code, and a species such as us that is got this very limited sense, we're in a sensory wilderness. Slowly we start seeing the true nature of reality. At the moment, we're in a sea of sensory information. We've got rudimentary nerves, like our vision sees 1% of the visual spectrum. Our ears hear less than 1% of the auditory spectrum. It's literally our senses are us viewing the world through this pinhole. But the process of evolution as time goes on is to slowly start lifting the veil, right? And consciousness and the physical shell, they're two separate things. And so we're sort of starting to emerge from this primordial ether, and we're climbing it one rung at a time, and we've got these primate hands and we've got these opposable thumbs, and we grasp that ladder, which is time, and we slowly climb it with time. And we start emerging into these higher levels, and we're a humble ape, but we're slowly climbing our way up, and we won't be wallowing in disinformation for very long. As we start lifting our awareness, we'll start seeing some truths, and slowly we'll start rousing other people, our families and our communities. Do I love my species? It's not an unreasonable question to ask within large parts of the population, perhaps not amongst this group, but large parts of the population. We are plunged into self-loathing. We believe our existence is an absolute scourge upon the planet, and you see things like agriculture is destroying the planet. Imagine believing that farming is destroying the planet when it's our appetite for ultra-processed foods that are contributing to this. Do I love my species? We're pretty messy, and we're always in some form of disordered predicament, right? With all this technological process that's made our environments more sterile, you'd think our psyche could be helped with that. Like, where are the alcohol wipes, for my mind to give me this sort of illusion of virtuous polish? There's anger, there's greed, there's lust, there's fear. There's a lot of blemishes on my skin. But it is those things that make me human. We're a mess, yes, but we're a pretty amazing, beautiful mess, and I do love my species. So if I love you, I have to expand your awareness. And perhaps in this forum, I'm already speaking to the converted, partaking in parables and baptizing in knowledge for those that have already bathed in the cold waters of awareness. But if we can add to that, you guys go away and help your communities. But I do feel on a philosophical level that we're splitting. Humanity is fracturing. And 100,000 years ago, many types of humans coexisted. They could co-breed with each other, but they were a separate species. The Denisovians, the Neanderthals, even Homo erectus existed at the time, which is a very rudimentary form of species. And there were many more little dwarf-like creatures, forgotten what they're called, Homo florensis, I think it is. And Earth must have looked like Lord of the Rings. Like, if you could go back 100,000 years ago, it would be amazing. Eventually, because of something very unique to us as Homo sapiens, we won. But I look at the world now and I'm seeing a reverse process, and I'm heartbroken at it, but there's evolution at play. We're actually fracturing into many depending on the level of awareness and the level of consciousness. You've got to ask, right? What the hell's going on? I mean, the world's plunged in chaos, and if you're aware, you can sense that. You can sense that. I don't think history is what it is. The Wright brothers managed their first flight 120 years ago. Some of the military weapons of flight that are available now that we don't even see in the basement of Lockheed Martins and Raytheon would blow our minds. Right, would blow our minds. That progress within a century has been astounding, truly remarkable. Now, remember, us as Homo sapiens, we walked the planet for 300,000 years, yet we've developed so much technology within a brief 100 years. It just doesn't quite make sense. If you go back 8,000 years ago, our cranial capacities were higher. We had 180 cc more brain. So something doesn't quite make sense. I think if you assume a linear trajectory for technological advancement, something doesn't compute. I believe our timeline must be start, reset, stop, then restart. I think we get to very, very high levels of technological advancement, and then we're plunged back into some form of cataclysmic event, which then puts us back into this hunter-gatherer stage. So in my view, if you've got a species that perhaps escaped that cataclysmic event, by this time, with all the time that's gone past, they would have domesticated gravity, they would domesticate time, and they would domesticate any lesser species that stumbles into their field. Maybe Plato's Atlantis shouldn't be ignored, and I think a thinker like Plato is to be ignored at our peril. And Plato wrote, now in this island of Atlantis, there was a great and wonderful empire which had rule over the whole island and several others. He's a brilliant thinker. If you follow the news closely and if you follow the American Congress and so forth, there's been a lot of talk on UAPs and UFOs, and there's talk of what is known as the Disclosure Act, as in all these sightings that have been noted for many, many decades. There is potentially some disclosure coming. And ever since I was a child, I've had a fascination with ancient Egypt and UFOs. It's really occupied my mind, and I guess I was a strange child, but I spent hours reading on this stuff, and to me, it required our attention. It's not something you dismiss. That's the ancient god Ptah, and next to it is the Oscars. What we're not seeing is so much of our modern world, right? So much of our modern world is shaped by a much more ancient one. I truly believe an ancient culture, and particularly the Egyptian culture that built the Great Pyramids, it never really died. I think it morphed, it took on a modern skin, and we're a tragic animal. We have this need for worship. When gods are needed, I believe they provide them for you. And you just have to look at symbolism, and I study symbolism a lot. Pyramids are everywhere, and when you look at the spiritual epicenter of the world, within Rome, the Vatican, that's a separate little state of its own, right? And it's the same with Washington, D.C. Doesn't necessarily answer to America, and it's the same with London. Washington, D.C. is the military base for this power. The Vatican, the spiritual base, and London is the banking base, right? The Bank of England. And the symbolism is everywhere. In fact, the pyramid in London is directly taken from Egypt. So it appears there's some money, a Babylon money magic weaved into our money. And Voltaire once said of the Holy Roman Empire, it was never holy, nor Roman, nor an empire. And we have to wonder, was the Holy Roman Empire a morphing of something else, right? We know what the Third Reich was. We know what Hitler's Third Reich was. Very few people ask what the Second Reich was. The Second Reich was Imperial Germany. But the First Reich was the Holy Roman Empire. It seems this never really dies. It morphs. And what was before it, we don't know. Power doesn't relinquish its grasp very quickly. And something similar might be said of modern monetary theory. It's neither modern nor genuinely monetary, And money's inherent flaw, though, might be older. Some people have described Babylon as the origin of money, potentially the origin of evil. And Washington, D.C. is fascinating. It's an absolutely fascinating place, and one has to study it to understand there's so much paganism weaved into Washington, D.C., a lot of symbolism, a lot of their presidents like Lincoln and George Washington and many others are sort of deified as a pantheon of Greek gods. The Capitol building there is based on Roman architecture, and within the dome is a painting which shows George Washington surrounded by a pantheon of Roman gods ascending to a godlike status. I mean, what's all that about? Are we really going to ignore that? When you look at symbolism, it's everywhere, and some of these pertinent places like the European Organisation for Nuclear Research, which is CERN, which is the Large Hadron Collider. It's the largest particle collider in the world, located in Geneva. You see the statue of Shiva noted there. The research there, as a side note, in CERN is fascinating. They recent experiments unveiled something called an amplituhedron. It's a geometric object that exists outside of the 4 dimensions that we exist in. And you've got to ask yourself, right, if there are geometric objects that exist outside this dimension, do conscious agents exist outside that dimension? Certainly the ancient Hindus thought so. The statue of Shiva is interesting, and it adorns their lab. Shiva is the destroyer and creator in Eastern philosophy. So what I'm trying to get at, right, I've gone on a tangent here, but what I'm trying to get at is those that rule over you understand the esoteric. They are familiar with the realm beyond our senses. And unless we are on that level, unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever have full awareness. We've been ensnared by money. I believe humanity's been ensnared by money, and they've trapped us with a net. We've got taxes, we've got jobs that drain our souls, and as a result, there is disconnect through distraction from nature, farming, food, sun, moon, and so the list goes on. And so remember I said our bodies, our physical shells, which need to be aligned to nature, are like a vessel for our souls or awareness to be able to express itself. So without physical health, unfortunately, we can't fully express our awareness. And I think that's a intentional thing. So who holds power? I mean, on the surface, David Bushell's talk was brilliant. Corporate entities hold power. Corporate entities hold power. Pharmaceutical industries within my own field of medicine hold power. And within the food industry, it's obscene. A few companies give us this illusion of variety, but they hold all the power. And the modern system of money promotes it. Corporatism is a byproduct of what Murray Rothbard, a famous economist, described as the Cantillon effect. When you print money, it is the politically connected and the most wealthy entities, such as corporations, that are given access to that money. With that money, they take that money and rapidly either purchase profits or expand business before inflation kicks in, which is a sin of printing money. When inflation kicks in, they've already purchased assets or built business, and then it filters down to you. You get the printed money after inflation's kicked in. Raises questions about something called fascism. What is that? We'll speak on that in a bit later, but there's something called, within game theory and economics, the tragedy of commons. It's basically when you pursue profit, right? There is no end to it, and especially when you have a soulless entity like corporations come in. Corporations don't have soul. You'll harm humanity. The pursuit of profit harms humanity, and the only solution to it is morality. But do corporations have morality? They can't. And so the modern system of money promotes corporatism. Simple as that. There's no, it's just mathematics. That's just how it works. It's just logic. Eventually, there are entities more powerful than corporations, and these are asset managers. And take BlackRock, for instance, they've got about 10 trillion in assets under management. It gives them power and influence over the global economy, activates what I spoke about called the tragedy of commons. And these entities, and we think government rules over us. No, it doesn't work like that. Corporations sit over governments, and asset managers sit over corporations. What sits over asset managers? That you start delving into the metaphysical realm when you get into that. They hold power, and they will become more and more robotic. In 2017, Larry Fink, the main guy at BlackRock, launched something called Monarch. It's a computer program, and now over 80% of the stock market and trades for them are executed by robots. A robot doesn't have a soul, and these corporations increasingly will not have a soul. Let's go back to fascism. We've talked about corporations. Let's go back to fascism. Fascism, I mean, you look there and that's a picture of Benito Mussolini and Abraham Lincoln, and what I've highlighted there is what's known as the fascists. And you'll see it all through the United States, symbolisms everywhere on coins, on their various organizations, etc. You see Barack Obama here. Behind him are the symbols of the fascists. And what it is, if you want to understand the origin of the word fascism, fascist is a Latin word which is fascist, which means bundle, a bundle bound by wooden rods and sometimes including an axe with a blade coming out of it. The fascist is an Italian symbol in ancient Rome, where it symbolized a Roman king's power to punish subjects. Benito Mussolini believed himself to be on par with Caesar, and he adopted it. So fascism is the movement that promotes the idea of a regimented nation under the control of a tyrannical autocratic leader. Others have described fascist movements as a merger between state and corporations. When you study the symbolism built into America by the founding fathers that persists to this day, you realize that the superpower that essentially that the world depends on potentially arises from beginnings that were always designed to give it this form of corporate merger with a police state. The language of those that rule over us is esoteric and occult. And that's Mussolini who said that, which if you look at it on the internet and try to do a Google search on it, it'll be fact-checked and it'll say Benito Mussolini never said it. But those that understand the game of politics can see that corporatism and fascism is basically a merger between corporatism and government power. You're probably wondering how it all sort of relates to farming. David said it. Corporatism ruined farming, and the seed and agrochemical industry is all centralized. There's a few companies, they all play together in the same field. There's no real competition anymore. The free market's dead. A smaller entity that starts up, a small startup that shows success is quickly absorbed. When you're a small business and you enter an ocean where these big sharks swim, you're very, very quickly gobbled up by these entities, and all it takes is for money. They'll just buy you out with money, and at some point, we as small business, we cave in, and that's understandable, right? It's a hard game. Farming's a hard game. So the entire game of farming is now dictated by these entities like Bayer. And Bayer, who produces glyphosate or Roundup, they're an interesting company, and certainly as a gastroenterologist, I've got my views on it. The government agencies that talk on the safety of it would say a trace amount of it is fine in food. But when you look at the base of the pyramid where it's promoting significant amount of grains, which we know require monocrop systems to produce and require these agrochemicals like glyphosate, huge amounts of glyphosate to be involved with that genetically modified crop. Unfortunately, there's a lot of trace. There's probably more than trace. There's glyphosate residue in our food. And when you think probably 75% of our calories for the general Australian population comes from grain, and that's not organic grain, what does the chronic ingestion of this glyphosate do? They say it's safe for humans. The government agencies say it's safe for humans. However, my understanding now as a gastroenterologist is that huge parts of the gut microbiome, up to 50 to 60%, is sensitive to glyphosate. So we're chronically ingesting a weak antibiotic. What are the implications of that? And we talk about dysbiosis and a disordered gut. I believe we're suffering the effects of our food and water systems, and potentially you combine that with a lack of exposure to things like sunlight and low vitamin Ds, and then eventually you've got a recipe for disaster. And on top of that pyramid, you can see that red meat has been absolutely vilified, along with chicken, eggs, fish, etc. They want us to consume a diet rich in grains, but what is the quality of those grains like? Eisenhower warned, he was an outgoing president of America, and he warned that we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. Potential is disastrous for the rise of misplaced power and exists and will persist. What he was basically warning about was, if there is money in war, we will be plunged in an eternal war at all points of our existence. And he was right, we are. And I spent a lot of time wondering, is there a similar complex in healthcare? And unfortunately there is. It's the triad, or the unholy trinity as I call it, which is big food or big agriculture along with big pharma and big medicine. You need to break farming, right, to break health, which then requires chemicals, which is big pharma. So it appears that chemical-based farming leads to chemical-based health, or a version of that type of health. I don't think it's true health. I think it's more of a band-aid measure. Think of it this way: if you farm on monocrop systems and your food is produced on monocrop systems, you generate a monocrop system within your gut. This beautiful, diverse ecosystem of microbiome that should exist no longer can. Monocrop farms reflect a monocrop gut. So if you give a criminal a gun, he'll rob a bank. But if you give a few bankers the ability to control and manipulate reserve currency through reserve banks, which are private entities which have nothing to do with the government, you'll destabilize the world, and you'll build structures around you that are based on no fundamentals, right? And that's what inflation is. When you look at this slide, there's a lot of symbolism here, and I wonder if anyone can make the link. But when Moses descended down, and I'm not a Christian, but I love theology and I'm a student of it. When Moses descended down from the mountains with these commandments by which to live life, granted to him by what was apparently a higher power, he noticed the children of God praying to a golden bull, and that's the Baal, B-A-A-L, right? If you go outside the New York Stock Exchange, that's what you see. You see the golden bull, Baal, bull, right? We've become worshippers of money. The society has become worshippers of money, and the symbolism is there for everyone to see. You know, and I look at this upcoming presidential election. It's just an orchestrated illusion, a facade that perpetuates the status quo. Right wing, left wing, doesn't matter. Red, blue, does not matter. The head of the bird is the same, and it further entrenches the descent into tyranny, into a police state. The news tightens, and inflation, we will see, will unfortunately continue to worsen with worsening government debt. The last financial crisis was about bailing out banks. This financial, which is to come, mathematically has to happen. It'll happen in a few years. I don't know when. Will be about governments. Who bails out governments? And the answer is you can't. No one can bail out governments. It's no longer bailing out banks. It's bailing out governments, and it'll be interesting to see what will happen. I'd just like to briefly touch on the allegory of the cave. Plato, again, one of my favourite thinkers, he talked on something called the allegory of cave. It's where you get humans essentially born into captivity, right? Theoretically, okay, metaphorically speaking, and they're chained to the wall, and all they can do is stare at the wall ahead of them. Behind them is a great fire. To me, that fire is best symbolised in this modern world as media. And you've got the puppeteers of society projecting images, utilising the fire on the screen. And to these people that are trapped down there, that becomes their reality. And that's our news and our social media algorithms and everything. And the puppeteers of society control that, unfortunately. Now, say if one of these prisoners was to leave, you can see the guy at the surface there at the top, he would see reality for all its glory. And when he returns to the cave, I mean, he's compelled. He can't unsee the things that he's seen. And he will try and tell his fellow prisoners, and I do believe they'll laugh at him initially, but if you persist hard enough, they'll essentially kill the man trying to free them. They wouldn't want to leave the safety and the comfort of their known world. But I believe we have to. It's just simply no question. We have to try and understand reality either intuitively or intellectually. I actually think intuition is the most powerful thing. And I came to that conclusion when I started realizing irritable bowel syndrome was essentially a disease that was trying to tell these people that something was wrong with the environment. And I realized the beauty of the female intuition and why irritable bowel syndrome is so prevalent in the female population as opposed to, I'm not saying men aren't intuitive, but I'm saying the feminine is highly intuitive. It is why that they are affected with it more. It's simply their nervous systems telling them that not all is well with the environment. So intuition's important, and we have to try and use intuition to try and understand our reality. Not everything will be found in your science textbooks. We have to try and help to move minds towards reality. And people that have seen the surface of reality, like most of you guys in this room, you've got an obligation. But at what point do you stop pushing, right? Because there's a lot of people that don't want to be woken up. But I do believe there's a storm coming, and I think it'll be a financial storm. But remember, I said evolution needs difficulty. We actually need it. We need a storm to clean out the rats that infest this ship and, bring it on. And perhaps we're heading for apocalypse, right? Apocalypse. Interesting word. It comes from ancient Greek. For those that have been socially engineered, they believe apocalypse is the end of the world, right? Armageddon. That's all rubbish. It couldn't be further from the truth. That word in Greek actually means to lay bare or to show the truth. So apocalypse is a disaster for those that create the illusion, right? For the rest of the world, it's a moment of clarity where the veil is lifted and it's lifted from the eyes of our species. Some more symbolism there. That's the national symbol of ancient Egypt, and you compare it to the Great Seal of the United States. I could talk about that United Seal state for a long time in terms of what the eagle's clutching, the stars above it, but there's so much Freemasonry linked into that. And the Freemasons were the builders of Washington, D.C. They are the architects of society, the illuminated ones. That's the Congressional Medal for the Air Force in America. They had two explanations. The initial explanation of what this was, it looks like the Statue of Liberty, but I've circled it there. It's actually Queen Semiramis. But in the latest one on their website, they've removed it and they've said it's just the Statue of Liberty. Queen Semiramis is essentially the Queen of Harlots in Revelations in the Bible, right, in the end of times. And you have to wonder, what is this major connection to Babylon? What is the Statue of Liberty? The builders of the Statue of Liberty, I think is Thomas Eiffel. He was the builder of the Eiffel Tower, high-ranking Freemason. And it seems like America was designed with something in mind. And I think the entity that is behind it thinks outside of lifetimes. It's not a simple lifetime. It's so complex on a level that we can't fathom it. Expand your consciousness. It's a glorious thing, and harness your curiosity. You've got to read their symbolism. Yet another high-ranking Freemason, Manly P. Hall, he's one of their highest. He wrote, "They wander in the darkness, seeking light, failing to understand that light is in the heart of the darkness." He also said, "When man learns to read symbolism, a great veil will fall from their eyes." I want to leave you guys with the last few slides, and this is something I wrote. I wrote that we're basically like pieces on a chessboard. We're not being played by human hands necessarily. Metaphorically speaking, I think something else that's more powerful battles over us. And we're like forward-facing pawns. We can only look ahead. But when you start noticing what's around you, you start seeing stallions, you see knights, you see the gatekeepers of religion, the bishops moving through and cutting pieces, and we see these mighty towers and these shadows that lurk within castles. We see the queen feasting as the pawns starve. But the reality is, death is a great equalizer. Like, all the pieces upon death leave in the same box, carried by the same hand, same mind. And this is a game. We're here to play a game, and the creator of this game needs heroes. It needs villains. Otherwise, there's no story to tell. It's no game to play. I mean, could you imagine existing in a utopia? How boring that would be. We need difficulty. Humanity needs difficulty, and we've got to embrace it. We've got to descend into the void. Once your eyes adjust to the darkness, it's actually quite beautiful down here. Once you lose that fear, then you can fight back. You can't wage a war or lead in battle if you're ridden with doubt and fear. The opposite of love isn't actually hate, it's actually fear, and fear is crippling. And I believe if there is a road that leads to tyranny, it's paved with the bricks of apathy, which require fear. I mean, these apathetic people aren't apathetic truly. I mean, they're just fearful. They're fearful. So the solution is very simple. It's connection and community. That's how we wrestle back control. We lift awareness of what we are. We reconnect with our soul. We've got to understand that it's all one. At the birth of the universe, the Big Bang, right, which they think now is 23 billion years ago, not 13 billion years ago. It keeps getting older. There wasn't the four fundamental forces that exist. And four fundamental forces are electromagnetism, gravity, the weak nuclear force, and the strong nuclear force. It was all just one. It was one force. That's why they call it a singularity. And as the universe slowly cooled, these forces slowly appeared. It's all one. And when you comprehend that it's all one, you're beginning to understand the glue that holds it all together is actually love. I mean, Jake does what he does because he loves his species. I do what I do because I love my species. His instrument's farming, right? My instrument's medicine. The question is, what's your instrument? Like, what is your soul telling you to do? And we've got to utilize that instrument to express how we feel. But I think most of us feel it. There's a rift. There's a fault line appearing between the masses of our civilization. We are fracturing into many. And amidst this chaos, there's a single detail that separates these two groups. Those that would rather live comfortably in a lie and those that will live uncomfortably in the truth. And I think I'm probably someone who'd rather exist really uncomfortably, but in the truth. And how about those I love? How can I leave them? And that's a big question, right? But you just realize that we're all on different stages. Like the soul, which is an eternal thing, is on a different stage, and you can't force people, and I hope this is not derogatory, but the way I wrote this was some are puddles, some are meandering streams, some are tranquil waterways, they're super peaceful, but they have depth. But a few are savage rivers, but eventually all these bodies of water lead to unfathomable depths, and that's ocean. Unfortunately, a puddle can't flow with a river, and only like will recognize like, and only real can recognize real. So you just got to find your tribe. We will all one day swim in this big ocean of the deep unconscious. A puddle's incapable of an outpouring, it's like an alphabet soup with no form. It can't form anything of worth. And today I want to flow with the river along the violent current of syntax. No poetry ever originated in a puddle. But do I hate the puddle? I don't hate the puddle. I just realize that I can't flow with it. So my message is find your tribe, hold them close, vibrate at a really high level. Those that can't match the vibration will vibrate out of your life. You'll no longer be understood by a lot of people. Forgive them, build your ties with community. Again, I'm not a Christian, but lovely stories in the Bible, like Lot, fleeing a certain city. Consider fleeing gentrification. Consider fleeing the concrete walls into rural communities. And because when the financial crisis does occur, I don't think cities will be pleasant places to live. And like Lot, don't look back at what you used to love. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, brother. What's that?
Okay. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Pran. That was absolutely beautiful, mate. The whole room went so still. And whenever that happens in my life experience, it's stillness inside because it's joy. And how do you follow your bliss state? What are your...
To me, how do I follow my bliss state? I think music for me, it's just, it puts me into a deep meditative state, and I just block out the world. I just silence the sensory information and go deep into my mind. I'm trying to get better with meditation. My mind doesn't always allow it, but there are many ways to access bliss states, and many ways to lower the veil of reality, and when we do that, we naturally revert to a very peaceful state as human beings. We're not a warlike species anymore. And this is why the hippie revolution in the 60s and 70s had to be quite rapidly squashed, because they simply wouldn't go to war. To Vietnam, they just couldn't recruit them. And, why would I go to war with my brothers? We're all one. It takes you back to that state of singularity. So I think it's exciting that some of these medications are being looked at by the TGA to treat PTSD and severe depression. And it'll be interesting to see what it does for the larger community. But these methods certainly open your mind, and deep breath work can do the same. There's just many ways into your own self.
Anyone else? Jake?
Pran, great presentation. I've been listening to you for years, and the journey of less graphs and less data is fantastic, and I'd like to encourage you to keep doing what you do, because anyone can read a graph up on stage, but not everyone can do what you just did for us. So that was awesome. Everyone here is on their own paradigm-breaking journey, learning new things about different parts of the world, and we all have to contend with being in the world at some level. So I'd like to know how you navigate your truth and your beliefs in a clinical setting, which I guess is where you're still generally earning your living and providing for your family. What's that reality like for you?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jake. I actually wrote a few days ago that the real ones teach you to play within the matrix, not leave the matrix, right? You can't leave the matrix. This is the matrix. The cosmos is the matrix. You've got to learn to play within it. How do you play within it? You've got to bend the rules. You've got to bend the rules to be able to play within it. Sometimes I look at me and I'm a successful guy, financially. I didn't come from success. I've worked my way into it. I'm a benefactor of the medical industrial complex. How it's irony, isn't it, that I'm sitting here slagging it off, but every dollar I earn is a link on my chain out of Plato's allegory of the cave. It allows me, one further step at a time to get to the surface of the cave. And if I can see that, if money grants me the freedom to be able to see that, then potentially I can touch others. And at a clinical level, my advice isn't outrageous. I'm not out there saying eat only plants or eat only meat. And it's like, where was your food farmed? And that's my message. Who's your farmer? Do you know your farmer? Or are you a slave to the duopoly, which is Coles and Woolworths? And if you are a slave to that duopoly, then do you realise the way they treat farmers? Do you realise how they control farming, basically, and tell the farmer how to farm? The contracts that they sign with them stipulate how farming should be done. So I just want to make people aware of the powers that rule over them. I think I've gotten to a point in my practice where people seek me out. Specifically, they know my message, right? But to someone who's walked off the street, with a referral from their GP to see me, it's a shock. But I'm comfortable in being weird, Jake. I'm a weird guy, and yeah, it's I'll wear that proudly. But I've also perfected my technique there. I can lower them in slowly. I'll lower them in slowly. And I think it's important to have an element of charisma and to be able to, look them in the eye. As soon as a patient walks in my room, I push away the computer. I'm just directly looking at them in the eye and I try and connect with them. And I realise there are some people that you'll scare off, but there are others that message really resonates with them, and they can change lives and they change their families' lives. So, yeah, learning to play within the matrix is very important. Yeah.
Thanks, Pran.
Pran Yoganathan, everybody.